Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Cody, I'm a marketing specialist here at QNAP, and I'm here with our product manager, Deval. And today we wanted to go over the QNAP app Virtualization Station. This is QNAP's native hypervisor that allows you to host virtual machines right on your QNAP NAS. And so taking a look at the agenda, on the next slide, we'll be going over what virtual machines are, what virtualization is used for, QNAP's implementation of virtualization, and we'll talk about PCIe passthrough for VMs on virtualization station, and we're also going to go over VM live migration. And then at the end, Deval is going to give us a live demo, and we'll also have a Q&A time. So what are virtual machines, first off? Virtual machines are sort of logical computer, or basically an operating system that runs on top of either a computer or a server. Basically, with a virtual machine, you can run basically an entire separate system on your computer via a web browser. And this can be done remotely as well. So with your computer, you could access a server such as one of our NAS models and run a virtual machine that is stored on the server using the server's processing power and storage, but run it on your computer through a web browser. And so virtualization can be used in a number of use cases for both private individuals and businesses. VMs can be used as a sandboxed environment. It can also be used to run old operating systems or old software. It can also help consolidate IT environments and simplify management. And QNAP supports both virtualization station in order to run VMs on the NAS, as well as common protocols used for virtualization server storage, such as iSCSI and Fiber Channel to support larger scale virtualization environments. And so what do we mean when we say a sandboxed environment? Well, if something happens to the VM, like it gets infected with a virus, or you accidentally do something to the system that impedes the functionality of the system, you can just either wipe it entirely and create a new one, or revert back from a snapshot of the VM. This makes VMs really useful for home labs, as users can set up systems that they can play with and experiment with without worrying about their computer being ruined. And virtualization station is a great tool for doing this, as it's an affordable and it's also a simple option to set up and use. So another reason people may want to deploy virtual machines is that it's an easy way to run an older operating system. A user may have an older game or application that no longer runs on current operating systems. Virtualization is a simple way to run that older operating system on your computer and use that functionality without having to revert the operating system of your actual primary computer. And in addition to running older softwares, you may want to just have the ability to run different software that isn't compatible with your current workstation. For instance, you can use a virtual machine to run Windows on your Mac computer. So if you want to try out or maybe get used to using the Windows OS, or there's some program that is only compatible with Windows, you don't have to go out and buy an entire Windows computer. You can simply just run a virtual machine and use Windows right there on your Mac. And when you're done, you've still got Mac OS there as your primary computer's operating system. In the business world, running virtual machines can help IT departments consolidate management tasks such as software updates. Being able to go into virtual machines and update software or troubleshoot some issues a lot easier when they can access the VMs right from their desk, as opposed to having to physically go to each individual workstation to troubleshoot some problem or make some update. Additionally, running all of these machines on a single server could potentially save power. And if they're using a server for storage already, there may be processing power that can be best utilized by implementing virtual machines. So virtualization in business environments helps consolidate and simplify a lot of IT management. And so QNAP's native hypervisor is the app Virtualization Station, and this app allows you to create a virtual machine directly on the NAS. You'll allocate resources from the NAS for the virtual machine with a VM set up on a QNAP. As long as you can access your NAS, you'll be able to access the VM. You can also create multiple VMs in Virtualization Station as long as your NAS has the available system resources to handle it. And PCIe passthrough enables added functionality from PCIe expansion to be allocated to virtual machines on the hypervisor. Some potential expansion options include GPU pass-through, SAS expansion pass-through, and USB pass-through. And Deval is going to go over some of these in more detail.
Thank you very much, Cody, and good morning, everybody. All right, so GPU pass-through, right? This is a newer feature that we recently introduced with the QNAP virtualization. Actually, the feature was there, just wasn't supporting that many cards. Now with newer virtualization, now it supports much more connected cards with your QNAP. So PCIe pass-through just allows you to install a compatible card that is on your QNAP, on your compatible list for your QNAP hardware. And once it's installed, you can actually just assign that card directly to a VM, so the VM can access resources directly from that card to use it for itself, right? Before that, without GPU pass-through, you won't be able to use that particular interface card if you have it installed on a QNAP. So there are three different modes of GPU pass-through that we support currently. The first one is GPU pass-through. So GPU pass-through allows you to install a video card or a graphic card onto your QNAP NAS, and then once you install that, you can just pass that GPU directly to the VM, so you can use the GPU directly on the VM. So some use cases for the GPU pass-through is something like for transcoding, if you're using for lightweight video editing, using Adobe Premiere, or you want to just use it for transcoding, you can just use the GPU pass-through with a good enough GPU card, and then just use it for transcoding inside the VM. And the VMs can also do image and video transcoding. So that's a great example. Another use case would be AI model training with TensorFlow and other applications that you can use. Then the VM can just keep using the GPU to train the AI software that you have installed within the VM. And because AI software usually requires GPU, so you can use that for that as well. Another the second part of the the pass-through is for the connected SAS expansion fiber channel. So you can also do fiber channel. You can now pass through your fiber channel SAS card to connect external storage directly to your VM. So you can access the data directly stored within that particular SAS expansion bay, or you can access it directly from the fiber channel expansion bay, directly from the QNAP. So you can now actually just pass through your storage equipment connected via SAS or fiber channel onto the VM directly without having to access it through the QNAP NAS. Before that, you have to actually connect it to QNAP. You will have to share that resources from the QNAP software and then access it through the VM using network. But now you can just access it directly through the VM itself. Lastly, another great feature that we recently introduced is USB pass-through. The USB pass-through allows you to access your USB devices such as flash drives, audio cards, or USB audio cards directly from the QNAP, directly from the VM, and without having to go through the QNAP itself, or just not available completely. So with a GPU, when using the virtualization for GPU pass-through, the load on the CPU reduces drastically, as now the GPU is taking over the image and the video processing task instead of the CPU doing that particular task. As you can see in the example here, before GPU pass-through, the CPU usage was around 68%, because the CPU was doing the image processing or video processing. But after introducing GPU through PCIe pass-through, the CPU dropped down to almost 21%. So that's a great improvement when using a GPU within the VM. And again, this is a great tool for using it for raw file processing via Adobe Premiere or AI model training or applications that using OpenGL or DirectX applications, right? They can access the GPU resources directly without having to go through the CPU usage. For SAS and Fiber Channel, you can connect directly to the external storage, the VM, for large storage requirements. So you can access it. You can access the storage equipment directly from the VM. So if you have a large external drive using Fiber Channel or using SAS card, you can just connect it directly to the VM and just pass through it directly from the VM and just access the data, and you can start using that particular data, store more data. If your VM requires a large storage requirement, you can use the SAS applications to have a large enough storage application. Lastly, for USB pass-through, you can use applications such as USB sound card or external drives to connect directly to the VM, so you can access those resources directly from the VM itself without having to go through the QNAP. Now, before the USB pass-through, you actually didn't have that particular option. If you have a USB sound card, if you have a USB device that you connect to the QNAP, you actually cannot access that particular resources from the VM itself because there's no USB pass-through. But with the new USB cards that we have, you can now do a USB pass-through directly to the QNAP. We have a project based where a user is trying to use connecting a USB external hard drives that they want to access directly from the VM. So they just perform the USB pass-through for the USB card and just keep connecting external hard drives to the particular VM, or sorry, to the USB card, and the VM can access the data directly from the USB without having to go through the QNAP. And once they eject the USB external hard drive, connect another USB external hard drive, access the data from that USB hard drive, just keep switching USB hard drives. Another great example of using USB pass-through. So that's about it for the USB pass-through. Back to you, Cody.
All right, thank you, Deval. And QNAP also now supports live migration of virtual machines. So you can basically transport a VM to another QNAP NAS. This can be useful if you need to make some update to the NAS and you need to shut down or reboot the NAS, but you still want to provide access to the virtual machine. This can also be used to balance the workload of a NAS so that if too much is running on one NAS, but there isn't much being done on another, you can just move the VM over to the other NAS to utilize your hardware resources the best. And Deval is going to give us an in-depth look at what this looks like and some more of the virtualization station features.
All right, so VM live migration is actually a newer feature as well that was introduced recently with the new virtualization version 3. Live migration can help IT managers keep processes running smoothly, even when they want to perform maintenance tasks like rebooting the original server, upgrading the firmware for the original server, or even upgrading the hardware of the original server. So let's say if you have multiple VMs running on the QNAP NAS, and then you want to upgrade that particular firmware for that particular QNAP NAS, or upgrade the virtualization station version of the QNAP of the original QNAP NAS, but you don't want to stop that services running from that particular virtual machine. So you can actually just migrate that into a second QNAP NAS with similar or upgraded hardware, and then that has enough CPU and RAM resources similar to the original QNAP NAS, and then still keep your VMs running. So if you have any processes that's running within the particular VM, that process will still be running. And then once the migration completes, you can just we can upgrade the firmware for the original QNAP NAS, or you can upgrade the hardware or reboot the NAS or whatever you like to do for the maintenance task, and then you can then migrate back to the original QNAP NAS once you're done with the maintenance task. So you can also do VM migration if you want to retire a particular server. So if you want to just completely retire a server and you have a newer NAS and you would just retire the original server, you can just migrate it over to the second NAS and just retire over the original server and just keep using the VM on the original NAS. You don't have to migrate back to the original NAS. Once it's migrated over, you don't have that. The newer NAS is now the original holder for the VM, so it doesn't have to be migrated back to the original server. It's not an HA feature, it's just migration. So you can migrate over to the second NAS and you can start using the VM on the second NAS. So basically that's a major feature for the VM migration. The next we're going to talk about is a newest feature for virtualization, which is SRIOV and QAT. So when running a VM on any hypervisor, there are a few challenges that user faces, especially when dealing with networking. You have slow responses from the network on a VM, or losing of packets, or completely losing connectivity of the VM, of the networking on the VM itself. Because VM is, when using a hypervisor, you're actually dealing with the original OS of the hypervisor and then accessing that resources through that particular VM. So let's say if you have on a QNAP NAS, right? When you're running a VM on a virtualization station, you actually have to use virtual switch to access the networking features of that particular QNAP into the VM. So if you want to access something if you want to access the networking within the VM, you have to actually go through the virtual switch to access the networking features. Now, that's a great way to access the device, but sometimes it can increase the network. It can decrease the network efficiency and increase the latency, and sometimes even have packet loss as well, because when you're accessing networking features, or sending or receiving packets through the VM, the packet goes through the virtual switch on the QNAP NAS, and then it goes to the VM. So those are the challenges for the particular. So when using virtualization on any hypervisor, this is due to multiple layers, right? You have multiple layers between the OS and the actual hardware. So you have a NIC card that is on the QNAP NAS. You have to go through the virtual switch and the NAS operating system before it reaches to the VMs on the hypervisor, and that will increase the response time as well as stability. It will decrease the stability. You have packet losses, network losses. If the NAS operating system or the virtual switch is having the problem, you may just completely lose the networking on the VM itself. With SRIOV, which is a single root I/O virtualization, a physical network can virtualize multiple lightweight PCIe device or physical device, which can be allocated directly to the virtual machines. If a VM uses VF on the physical network card directly, it can enjoy the network speeds that the card has to offer without involving the NAS operating system. So when you're using SRIOV, you can actually just access the resources directly from the card itself, without having to go through the QNAP's operating system or virtual switch. And if you have multiple VMs running, that card can actually create multiple virtual NICs with that physical port. So multiple VMs can access that particular port with bypassing the network, bypassing the virtual switch and the NAS operating system completely. With SRIOV, the VM will talk directly to the NIC using the virtual function, and therefore bypassing the NAS operating system. So you don't, the VM will have access directly from to that particular NIC card, and then that will increase the efficiency for the particular network. Here are some tests that we conducted with SRIOV, and we have seen at least a 20% enhancement when using the feature. We have seen reduced CPU usage on the NAS, and also the VM OS itself, which also improves the efficiency of the VM, thereby increasing the network performance. So when you're using the SRIOV, you actually have lower CPU usage on the NAS as well as the host VM itself, and also increasing the performance of the VM of the network by using the particular feature. Also, then the technology that was also introduced was QAT, which is Intel's Quick Access Technology, which improves compression performance of the VM. As you can see, it actually can achieve double the compression speed when using the using the QAT technology with almost the same CPU usage. So you actually get double the compression speeds, but not increase CPU usage. So that's another great feature. So these new technologies help provide network speeds of a physical network card directly to the VM, providing network services for the VM that requires real-time access, such as point-of-sale systems, ticket booking systems, audio-visual applications that require instant streaming, and more. So if you have any VMs that require instant access to the network, then this particular feature can really benefit using SRIOV. You can also require host CPU usage, providing more resources so because you're reducing the CPU usage of the NAS as well as on the VM itself, you have more CPU available for your applications that's running on the VM. So if you're running any ticketing system or if you're running any AV applications, that will have more CPU available now using this particular feature, because the host itself is using less CPU resources. And lastly, it actually increases network efficiency by 20%. And here's a list of hardware. So not every hardware and NAS supports SRIOV. So you have to make sure you have a NAS from this particular list and a NIC card from this particular list as well. The NIC card that comes within the NAS, those don't support SRIOV. That has to go directly, has to go through the virtual switch and NAS operating system. But the NIC cards like LAN 10G, 2T, X50, 5550, or 550, and Mellanox cards, those support SRIOV. So you need to make sure you have a compatible NAS and also a compatible NIC card to use the particular to use this particular feature. And you also have to make sure you have a certain BIOS version as well for those NICs. You can upgrade through the firmware. So make sure you have the latest firmware on that particular NAS as well. All right, so now we're going to move on to a live demo for virtualization. So let me, all right, so I'm going to log into a QNAP NAS. So if you want to use virtualization station, you have to first make sure you have a compatible NAS. So any x86 based NAS, which is Intel or AMD processor, can use virtualization station on the QNAP. You have to make sure that you have enough memory for the NAS itself, as well as so you have enough memory for the NAS itself as well as for the VM. So minimum required memory for running VMs or virtualization station is 4 gigabytes, but we recommend at least 8 gigabytes and above to run any VMs smoothly. So let's say to install a virtual machine, you have to first install virtualization station. For that, you have to visit App Center and just look for virtualization station. All right, once you have installed virtualization, you can just click on open, and that will go through the process. But you have to make sure you have a virtual switch already available. So under network and virtual switch, you go to virtual switch, and under advanced, you have to make sure you have you add a virtual switch. You can go to advanced mode, select an adapter, and then and next, and then you can select if you want a DHCP or just go through the networking setup for that particular virtual switch. I already have one created, and I have multiple VMs for that particular virtual machines. If you have multiple interface cards, you can actually have multiple virtual machines as well. So, virtual NIC cards. Virtual switches that uses physical NICs. So you can actually create virtual switches within the particular QNAP NAS using different interfaces. So once you have done the virtual switch, you can just open it, and it will open a virtualization station. Now, I already have multiple VMs running. I'm just going to give you an example of how to create a virtual machine. So to create a virtual machine, so you can click on Create. Just give it a virtual machine name. So I can just say Windows 10. Description, that's optional. You can choose. I do recommend you choose the correct operating system size, and then you can also choose boot firmware, which is legacy BIOS or UEFI. You can choose a CPU cores that you would like to have for that particular VM. You can also do memory on that particular VM. So I'm just going to keep it at 2 gigabytes. You can also do memory sharing. This is if you have multiple VMs running and they do share similar copies of the memory sharing will allow that to use less memory across multiple VMs, and you have to make sure that's also enabled under preference, under memory reservation, and then memory optimizer. You have to make sure those are enabled. Go back to create, and and then you have to make sure you select the proper image file to install the VM. So I can select Windows 7 here. I have Windows 7. And then you have to also make sure you create a hard drive. So every computer requires a hard drive, right? So you have to make sure you create a hard drive for that particular VM. So and then you can click on create image and then go to browse, and you want to make sure you select a location where you can save that particular hard drive. And you can also select the storage size. So how much hard drive does that particular VM needs to have? So I can say I want to make sure that my VM has 120 gigabytes of hard drive, and then select the right adapter. So if you have multiple virtual switch, and you can select the right switch that the QNAP should use or the VM should use to access your networking. And then you can set a VNC password. This is where if somebody was trying to access the VM remotely, they would need to require a password before they can access the visual part of that particular VM. So once you have done that, click OK. There are some advanced settings you can do after creating the VM. So under settings, you can actually go to settings again. You can actually select the CPU model. So if you plan to migrate this to another hardware, maybe VirtualBox, another virtualization, or another Hyper-V, so you have to make sure you select the right CPU model. You can also do passthrough. It'll just pass through what the QNAP itself uses, and then or you can emulate which CPU the VM can see. So I've selected i7, so it's going to be i7. You can select the core. You can also do CPU hard add. This is another feature that we added. So you can, when the CPU is running, you can actually add multiple cores for that particular VM when running the VM itself. Under boot options, you can select which boot device you want to have it as. So you can select CD. You can select the ISO file that you selected, or you can actually just select hard drive. If you have multiple hard drives already, you can also do that as well. You can actually add multiple NIC cards. So you can add another device, and then you can select which NIC card. You can select which NIC that you want to add it to. And if you have multiple virtual switch, so your VMs can access multiple network cards together from the networking. Another example here in the model, you can actually select Word IO as well. If you want to, that may increase that may improve network efficiency as well. But when you select Word IO, you have to make sure you install the network drivers. When you on the Windows or Ubuntu or whatever OS you select, drivers can be found under go back to information and insert guest tools. I'm so sorry about that. Insert guest tools. This is where you can once you insert the guest tools, you can install multiple drivers for your particular VM. So going back to your settings, you can also do that for networking, and under storage as well. You can also select Word IO for your hard drive as well, and you can increase your hard drive size here as well. You can also select your cache mode to write back, write through, force write back, depending upon the VM or application you're using within that particular VM. So again, if you select interfaces and you select Word IO, you have to do this. Make sure you do this before you install your virtual machine, before you go through the installation process for your VM. Because once you have done that, if you change your interface card, you won't be able. You will have issues booting up your VM. So when you're going through the installation setup, select Word IO before starting the VM. Now, once you have done that, through the installation setup, make sure you also click on Insert Guest Tools, and then through the installation setup. Let's say, for example, if going through Windows, you will have the ability to install drivers through the installation method when installing the VM, and then you can start using the VM itself. So again, you have to make sure you do this before. For networking part, that's okay. You can do that after the fact, but for the hard drive, you have to make sure you do it before. If you're doing it for the boot hard drive, let's say if you're adding another hard drive for the VM itself, you can actually do that after the fact. That is fine. But if you do copy some data on it, don't do it after you're copying some data, You can add multiple CD drives for having multiple ISO files installed within the QNAP. For video and audio, those are basic settings. For USB, again, you can enable, disable USB. For newer operating system, we do support USB 3.0. And going back to information, under PCIe pass-through, this is where you can do PCIe pass-through. If you have a compatible card, you can select. If you have a compatible GPU, SAS card, or USB card, you can select that particular USB card and click on OK, and that will allow you to pass through that particular card within particular VM. So those are the settings you can do for that particular within the virtual machine. Under account management, you can actually create multiple user accounts to access certain VMs. So you can grant access to the VMs as well. So if you want to create, this is different from the QNAP's own account information. You can create just virtualization account, and they can access just the virtualization part of the QNAP operating system and access the particular data. Backup and restore just allows you to back up your VM and restore the VM in case you want to back it up to another VM. You can also do snapshots as well. You can clone it. You can do snapshots on the VM itself. You can take snapshots. You can also do managed snapshots. And you can schedule multiple snapshots that you want to take on daily basis, hourly basis as well. You can do that within the virtualization station. And the preference, again, you can do memory reservation. You can access the remote NAS credentials. Also set up ports for virtualization station. So which port you can access. So if you use 8088, you can access directly the virtualization station remotely as well. Under VM marketplaces, we do have certain VMs that they can just click deploy and it will just deploy that for you. We have a QTS Cloud, that's a cloud version of QTS operating system that you want to run it. As well, you have AWS File Gateway, we have pfSense Firewall for our switches, so you can do that as well. Some other applications as well. We'll be adding a few more applications here, just keep going through that VM marketplace as well. And so that's for virtualization station. The last I'm going to show you is how to migrate a particular VM. So I have another VM running on another NAS itself. And under virtualization station, I have a NAS that's running and it's an Ubuntu 20 VM that is running. So I can click on migrate from this particular page, select the right NAS itself. It's going to check, making sure everything is compatible. May have selected wrong IP. It's 18. So all right, let's add another NAS itself, 10, 15, almost 38, 18. Enter the username password for your NAS. For the other NAS, test it. All right, I may have entered the incorrect login information. You can save the credentials as so you don't have to re-enter it every time. And once you've clicked OK, it was going to check the version and check everything, processing power, enough memory, enough logical CPU as well, and everything. Once everything is compatible, you can select Next, and you can say move the disk to same location, or you can allow it to do a separate location. We're just going to keep it as same location, and you can name your VM on the new location. Also, make sure you select the destination location. I'm going to select it as the VM location I have, and you can also, if the destination NAS has multiple virtual switches, you can select the right virtual switch, and then once you've done that, click Next. Just make sure everything is correctly selected and hit Migrate. Remember, the VM is already running on the QNAP NAS, so the first QNAP NAS has a VM installed and it's running, and then I've started the migration process. So it's running the migration process right now. It's pretty quick. It's going to take about 2 to 5 minutes to finish. And then once you've done that, it's going to start using that particular. It's going to use that. And on the new NAS, you're going to see here as Ubuntu is already coming in, and you can start using the VM already directly from here. While this is while this is happening, a few more features that you can I would like to show you is if you have a QNAP NAS that has an HDMI port, you can actually connect a USB keyboard and mouse, and you can assign this to QVM. What this allows you to do is you can use the QNAP NAS as just a regular computer. You can connect a USB keyboard and mouse on the back of the QNAP NAS, connect the HDMI port, and through the HD station, you can install virtualization, and you can use the VM as if you're using a local computer. So you can just access the VM and start accessing the just use a USB keyboard and mouse and just do whatever you like to within the VM, just like a physical computer that you have done on the virtualization. So that's another feature that you can do to assign this as a QVM. You have to make sure you have an HDMI port on the QNAP itself. Also, another feature on the QNAP NAS is try Windows VM. You can actually just select the new VM and just select which Windows version you want to install, and then just click on that particular version and download that. The QNAP will download the ISO file and will just install everything for you. So you don't have to go through the installation process and then start using the VM itself. That's try Windows VM. Once you have done that, so all right, so the migration is done. If you look at the new QNAP, the second QNAP where I've done the migration to, and the VM should be running on that particular VM as well. So see, it's running. I've done some installation, so I'm going to just restart now. But see, the VM didn't stop. The VM was already running on the second NAS as soon as it finished migration. So the processes that you're running on the VM, it's going to still run on that particular VM itself. So that's another great feature that we recently introduced. You can also migrate from the first NAS if you have any VMs running. So you can grab the VMs that you're running. So if you go here, I have multiple VMs that are running here. I can just grab one VM from that particular location and to the main location. So I don't have to access the original NAS. I can just grab the VM from the main location back to the QNAP NAS. All right. So so that is all about migration, and that is it for today's demo. Hopefully, I was able to get more information out to you. Back to you, Cody.
All right. Thank you, Yuval. And so with that, we'll soon enter Q&A time. I see there's a few starting to go up. And yeah, so Yuval is going to help answer some of the questions that you might have. If you have any questions, you can just type them in the question area, and we'll get to some of those for you.
All right, so the first question is about the TVS H1688X. Yes, the PCIe pass-through. It's yeah, there are some issues that are found on that particular version of the NAS. They're still working on it. I think the ETA. I'm not too sure on the ETA. I will have to get back to you, Kyle. So hopefully I can get more information on it, but it should be available very soon. There's a new firmware coming out for that particular NAS that will fix that particular PCIe pass-through issue. It's actually mostly related to the GPU part of it, so they're working on a fix right now and should be available pretty soon. Another question is, I'm more apt to use QNAP NAS as a NAS for another host. Do you have a recorded demo of connecting an EXSI host to a QNAP NAS via iSCSI or Fiber Channel? We actually have a few Q&A sessions that are, we have few articles that are published that actually go step by step on how to connect that to, how to connect a QNAP NAS to EXSI host. We do have another workshop coming in next month that dives deep into using QNAP as a data store. I'll also suggest you look out for that, and you can join that as well and get more information on it. Yeah, but we have articles on our website that actually give you step-by-step guide on how to set up for iSCSI or NFS for EXSI house. So just search for QNAP NAS, QNAP and EXSI host. You should be able find a few articles on our website. Another question is, I have hundreds of users accessing my network. Is there a way for all of them to have a VM? Hundreds of users, there's a lot of VMs that will need to be running. Virtualization won't be able to handle all of those VMs. We have maximum running VMs are about 8 to 10 VMs. So if you have a good enough performance, you may be able to run 10 or a few more VMs, but hundreds of VMs that'll be a little hard to achieve, depending on the hardware. Because remember, QNAP is still a NAS, a storage device first, and then it has a hypervisor on top of that you can run. So because it does have a lot of resources to work with, it's not a true hypervisor like a VMware or Hyper-V. So the VMs that you can run are limited on the QNAP itself, but you can still run about 10 to a few more VMs on the QNAP NAS itself. Another question is, what QNAP NAS are you using? So I'm using the demo QNAPs were TVS 472 XT and TS 1683 XU. So those are two VMs I was using for my demo. There are many problems of getting Mac to work with the QNAP hardware. How's the VM different? Okay, so I would need to get more information about what issues are you facing with the Mac hardware. There are no known issues with QNAP and Mac because we are compatible with Mac operating systems. So if you have any issues, I would recommend submitting a ticket under helpdesk.qnap.com, and they should be able to get that fixed for you. A VM is just running a virtual machine on the QNAP itself that you can use for different purposes. We have few purposes that I've known that many users use this for. As you can see, we have users use it for to have VM running for DHCP server, running for like QuickBooks application, accounting applications. VM is a great way to eliminate VMs that are running for smaller applications. If you have physical computers running small applications like SQL database servers, QuickBooks servers, or any accounting softwares, or if you want to do some lightweight streaming services, a lot of these services can be achieved through a VM. They can eliminate the physical server, physical computer from your network, and then that actually lowers your electricity usage because it's actually eliminating a physical networks from the QNAP from your location and just running it as a VM. So if you have any lightweight applications that you want to run on your computer, you can actually run it from the QNAP itself. We have a lot of users that use the QNAP for DHCP server, DNS servers, running on their networking, Active Directory servers that are running on the QNAP itself. So those are applications that can actually run on the QNAP. They don't require a physical server, and those don't require a high server usage, right? The Active Directory or DHCP servers can be run on a few core CPU with few RAM, and you can start using it as well. And with QNAP 10G connectivity on many of our NASs, you can actually have a high-speed connectivity for those applications as well. And then the last question we have, I think we have is, no, actually we have a few more. Can we use another hypervisor? You can actually use, you can't use another hypervisor on the QNAP virtualization because that's hypervisor on a hypervisor, but you can use, you can actually use, you can use the QNAP as a storage for your hypervisor you're running on your network. So if you have VMware or Hyper-V running, you can actually use iSCSI or NFS to store your VMs on top of the QNAP, but you can't run another hypervisor on the QNAP itself. QNAP virtualization runs on KVM or VirtualBox type applications, so that's a hypervisor that we use on the QNAP. I want to interface my QNAPs with EPYC hardware. Can this VM interface with other systems? I'll have to check on that. I'll get back to you on that. William. Okay. Hello. Did I see Zabbix go by as an application? So yeah, there's on the virtualization station marketplace, we have Zabbix application that you can, or VM that you can run on the QNAP itself. So does QNAP hypervisor support network card bonding? Not the hypervisor part of it, but you can actually do it on the virtual switch. You can actually bond the networking on the virtual switch part, and then just have that on a single VM itself, and virtual switch, and then you can provide that virtual switch onto the VM, and that will give you the bonding within the particular VM. And can you provide IO sizing guide? I'll have to check on that. And what type of VMs are recommended for SQL? It depends upon the database servers. You can use Windows applications that you can use for your SQL database server. So depending upon this application they're using for. If you have any further questions, just keep typing that into the questions box. Is it on the NAS 672 and 472 supported? I think if you talk about virtualization, no, virtualization is supported on multiple hardware that you can use. The base recommendation for virtualization on the QNAP is make sure you have an x86 based processor, so an Intel or AMD processor, and then minimum of 4 gigabytes of RAM, and at least 4.4.0 firmware and above. The older version did have virtualization support, but just lacking few features. But if you have a current NAS that does support the latest firmware version, and it has minimum of 4 gigabytes of RAM, and it has Intel or AMD processor, you can start using virtualization on your NAS as well. So it's not limited to XT processor. XT models. Currently considering upgrading to your 100 gig fiber ports. Is that compatible with 200 gigabytes fiber from another vendor? Right now, we don't have any cards that are compatible with other vendors, but we are working on few vendors that just keep a check on the compatibility list, and you will see some new cards coming in for newer for higher speed cards, 400 gigabytes cards. The hypervisor is actually not it's a free application that's available on QNAP NAS. As long as you have a QNAP hardware, you can actually install the hypervisor for free. The VMs that you install requires its own licensing. Those you actually just get that from the OS manufacturer. So if you're using Windows, just get a Windows license. But actual hypervisor licensing is free on the QNAP NAS. There's no limit on how many VMs you can run. As long as the QNAP hardware supports it, you can run as many VMs as you like on the QNAP itself. And the actual virtualization application is available for free. Can it support aggregated networking card? So the way you aggregate is through the way you aggregate is through the QNAP virtual switch. So under QNAP itself, you actually go through the virtual. You can actually go to port trunking, and then once you do the port trunking itself, you can then I'm so sorry, I'm losing. Yeah. So as soon as you do a port trunking and add that to your virtual switch, and then you can add that virtual switch within your QNAP NAS, and you can start using it on the QNAP itself. So yeah, so it does do port trunking just through the QNAP itself. We have another question. So there's another question that's like, sometimes over the years, I've noticed that QNAP has dropped, which QNAP apps. Is possible that this happens to this VM. So there are a few applications that we have drop support is due to the app support from the original applications. I think, but I don't see virtualization being discontinued anytime soon. I don't see we have a plan for, because that's one of the applications that we have a lot of users actually use our NAS for. We'll be continuing to grow that application, adding more features to the application. But there's no plans, or I don't see anytime soon that we can be discontinuing this particular operating system, or sorry, this particular feature of the QNAP NAS. Will be a replay of the webinar on the YouTube? Yes, that will be available on our QNAP TV YouTube page shortly. So all of our QNAP NAS do support hypervisor. The largest we have currently is the TSX H3088X. It's an enterprise 30-bay all-flash NAS device that does support this virtualization station. The only NAS that don't support is the larger NAS is the QES or ES operating system. Are both VHD and VHDX supported? So you can. So okay. So if you're referring to importing your VMs, it has to be, the format has to be OVA, OVX, VMX, and QVM or QVM formats. There's an image converter available. You can the compatible image that you can convert that from VMDK and VDI formats. So you can try that conversion process under virtualization. So if you go back here, let me show you here, under import and VM image converter, you can select. So first, importing a VM. So if you have a VM from another virtualization, you can select your image here, and then you can select the OVA, OVF, VMX, or QVM. Those are the application, but you can also do an image conversion as well. So if you have a compatible image, you can do VMDK and VDI images and select the converted location on your QNAP NAS, and you can also import those from another hypervisor. A lot of quick questions. You guys can keep coming in. What's the networking maximum number of networking cards supported by the hypervisor? It's actually not on the limit is not on the QNAP. On the hypervisor is actually limit on the QNAP itself. So depending upon your hardware of your QNAP, how many physical network cards it supports, those can be ported over to your virtualization station. So there's no limit on the virtualization itself. So for the VS, the QNAP hardware is the main limitation. Yes, the QNAP hardware will be the main limitation for virtualization. The virtualization is a great tool, and it's actually limited by the QNAP hardware itself that you're running it on. So your processing power, RAM usage, RAM availability, and physical networking card, PCI cards, the PCI slots. And going back to the other question, how many networking cards you can support. Also, if you run out of, because QNAP NAS come with at least 4 or 6 networking cards, and then they have few PCI slots. As long as you have PCI slots available for to adding networking ports, you can keep adding networking on your QNAP, on your VM itself. A question I want to ask you for years is, why does QNAP use small memory? If you're talking about physical memory size, or if you're referring to the amount of memory, if you talk about physical memory size, depending upon it all depends upon the QNAP's form factor. Right? If you have a desktop model, they use form factor itself. So if it's a small form factor, it requires a smaller memory. But if you're talking about this memory size itself, because a lot of our applications are not that memory intensive applications, so we do start with the And also, we want to make sure the price point, the starting price point of the QNAP NAS is at a lower price point, an affordable range. So we do provide a smaller memory size, and then we do have the option to upgrade them. So, and again, a lot of our features within the NAS don't require a lot of memory. So, a 4 GB of RAM is enough for at least the file server part of the QNAP and also running multiple applications. But yeah, certain applications, if you plan to use the NAS for, requires a high memory. So if you're running a virtual machine on the QNAP or using deduplication, those are specific requirements. Not all QNAP users require that particular option, right? So starting a large memory size just doesn't make sense for those users. Most of the users use this as a file server, just running few applications like Plex server, multimedia application, video editing. Those don't require high memory. But applications like virtualization or deduplication, those require higher memory size. So for those users, you can start with a low memory size and then just keep upgrading them. Can you hypervisor connect to vCenter? No, it's not related to vCenter, so it won't be able to connect to that. Can you hypervisor connect to VirtualBox hypervisor? So it does use similar signature, so it may be able to, but I haven't tested that. Can you vSphere hyper? No, it doesn't. vSphere cannot manage our hypervisor. All the great questions you guys can keep asking. So I'm using VS with Linux operating system. Can I connect to NVIDIA Jetson? I'm not too sure. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Actually, no, it won't be able to connect to the NVIDIA Jetson products. It's not compatible with the QNAP devices. So Kyle, yeah, that's a great question. Can you do a copy paste or on the Chrome? Actually, that feature is not yet available. We are working on that to see if there's a way to do it. As of now, that's not available. I think it's for everyone who's trying to understand the question is you can copy paste any text or data from your host operating system to the virtual machine. Currently, it's not yet available. All right, any further questions? We'll have about 2 more minutes. If not, then thank you, everybody. External NAS supported. External NAS through maybe networking. Yeah, you can actually, if you have another NAS running, you can just connect to that NAS through the VM using Samba or iSCSI services. But if you talk about external DAS, if you have a USB DAS, yeah, or USB, also a SAS, you can actually connect that through the PCIe passthrough. Do your snapshots have to go locally, or they can be pointed to another location on the device? You can actually do snapshots. Wait, talk about snapshots. So under here, you can take a snapshot. And you can. I think that's talk about the location on the snapshot. You can. It's only on the same location where the QNAP stores the VM at. What is the best use of VS3 for a NAS storage area? Not too sure if I understand that question. But again, the VS3 is greatly used for applications like running a lightweight physical server, just virtualize that onto your QNAP device. So when you have a Ubuntu VM with QSync installed, currently you have to download all the files to the VM, which means they're taking up space. So so that's related to the QSync. The QSync has recently announced a new feature on the Windows and Mac operating system called space saving. Those should be available on the QSync through Ubuntu or Linux operating system soon. So look out for that particular update on your QSync on the QNAP. So you don't have to download files on your physical machine or VM if you're not using that particular data. Only when you're using the data, it'll be downloading that data onto the QNAP, onto the VM itself. Do you have a recommended data protection app for your hypervisor? So the only applications is backing up your VM, or you can use snapshots on your QNAP NAS to back up your to do a backup of your VM itself. Do you have a preferred OS for your hypervisor VM? No, actually, there's no preferred OS. We have a list of compatible OSs that you can run on the QNAP. So we have all these OSs that you can run, and those are the specific versions of that particular OS that we do support. As long as you have you see your list or your OS on your list, we do recommend to stick with that OS that's in that list, and that should be fine. But there's no specific supported OS within that particular VM. I'll check with you on that, William, for the Mac OS. But do also support. Start with I would recommend start with helpdesk.qnap.com to get at least your ticket going, and then we can always take a look at that as well. But I'll take a look at that to see what's going on as well. Well, I'll get in touch with you on that one. All right, perfect. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. Today was a great Q&A session as well. If you guys have any questions, you can always email us at ussales@qnap.com, and we'll answer you on that as well. Thank you very much for joining in, and have a great day, guys. Back to you, Cody.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you for joining us. Just keep your eyes open for a follow-up email. We'll link to the recording of this webinar if you want to reference that again. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.